every few quarters, we see shifts in the connectivity landscape, different technologies, network technologies that get rolled out, engagements with customers and partners about how older technologies like 2G and 3G, as they sunset, what comes in its place?
Yeah, well, obviously the carriers continue to spend, billions overhauling the network, adding new technologies to help drive down their costs, but also at the same time enable new applications. And that's what we always see in cellular in general. So it's a moving target. The problem with that moving target, it's a big industry. There are a lot of locations. There are a lot of nuances with eliminating some of the technologies. I'll give you some examples. We're all about 4G and 5G in the U.S. There are still countries in Latin America that are, 4G and still using 3G and maybe even 2G, and they're very dependent on some of those technologies. So there's a lag time by the time that they get to the point where we are, where we're constantly pushing the envelope. We're thinking about 5G and applications for 5G. They're thinking about how do they get off of 3G to move on to full 4G or enable some of the technologies that we're already starting to get rid of.
Who's driving that variance from across country to country? Is it the MNOs? And if so, what do you think's driving that?
I think it's a combination of the MNOs wanting to continue to build more powerful networks, right? The reality is that you need to have the infrastructure, and then you need to have the devices to be able to take advantage of that infrastructure to be able to do that. And that's part of the challenge. So as the carriers are trying to deploy 5G networks, they're figuring out how can I get more spectrum? Well, they can buy more spectrum. They can, but that's a premium. That's very expensive. Well, they have 2G networks. Can they sunset 2G? Can they sunset 3G and allocate those resources to 5G as an example? And that's what this constant push-pull type of a thing of trying to deprecate older networks with, to be able to move to newer networks to be able to then enable these applications. Then you have this infrastructure that's set up for the old networks. And
right.
Now you have to overhaul it and replace it, and that's expensive.
What would drive some of them having to be sunset? Because that's what it sounds like you're saying needs to happen.
Yeah, so think of, let's see if I can give you an analogy. Think of in your house, you have Wi-Fi devices. They start off as 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi networks, right? All the devices, 802.11b, right? And then you started getting computers that were 802.11g. And then it went to N, and then it went to A, and AX, and a whole bunch of other stuff. And as you get faster and different frequencies, now you have faster computers and iPhones and other devices like that can really take advantage of those faster networks. Well, that's exactly the same problem, but at a much larger scale. It's across the U.S., it's across Canada, it's across Latin America and different countries.
Technologies like in the U.S., 2G and 3G have already sunset. What replaces 2G and 3G? There's still going to be a need for lower power devices or devices that don't all use 5G. So what's happening to replace that as you're seeing through conversations with customers and with carrier partners?
Yeah. So, the applications are going to drive where the infrastructure is going to be, the emphasis is going to be placed on the infrastructure enhancements, right? Take 2G and 3G, they disappeared a year or two ago. Most of them, maybe there's a couple applications here and there, but for the most part, they're all gone, right? All that frequency has been moved over to 4G applications or 5G. So what started coming out a few years ago in the U.S. was Cat M1 and NB-IoT, right? Low power, low data type applications that are running on a 4G core, 4G application, but essentially provide the same low data rate, low cost infrastructure that 2G and 3G devices were using, right? So there really wasn't a lot of speed, and but they were great for things like water meters. They were great for things like sensors and stuff like that, right? Well, that's where NB-IoT and Cat M1 came. Well, NB-IoT is already being decommissioned in the U.S. It's still rolling out in other countries around the world, but the move to 5G and things like RedCap that are coming, that are already being deployed, that's pushing the envelope, much faster in the U.S. The older 2G and 3G networks, they're gone. They've been replaced with Cat M1 and NB-IoT, but even that, I think, is short-lived. They solved the problem, but created problems in the sense that you needed new types of devices to be able to connect to those networks, and then 5G is around the corner. It's going to change the whole thing again anyway.
Some new terminology called RedCap. What exactly is that? Why is that different? And 5G doesn't seem as old as 2G and 3G. So what's driving kind of that diversification of 5G, even when it's kind of so new still?
Yeah, so RedCap, think of RedCap as reduced capacity, I guess, for all intents and purposes. There's probably a different name for it, but it basically is a 5G device that's going to give you the benefit of connecting to a 5G network for speed, better latencies and things like that. But not the full 5G of every antenna, of every frequency, of every band, right? So when you think about a cell phone as an example, right? That cell phone needs to have support for all the different variances of 5G from every carrier. So if you have a device that's a RedCap device, it's going to use a subset of that 5G frequency. It's going to give you, more speeds than you have today with 4G devices, like significantly faster speeds, right? But the applications that'll come out that'll take advantage of that are yet to be seen, right? I think the first thing that we'll see routers that are RedCap routers, which are faster. So you have a 5G router today, and it's pretty fast. But the reality is it's connecting to a 5G NSA network, a non-standalone network, which means it's sharing that network with a 4G network. And so it's not really as fast as it can be. That's an example. Tablets, there's no reason to have a tablet be a full, every frequency, every band that every carrier has, and you could be a RedCap device and get faster speeds than what you have today with the tablets today, as an example, right? So there's applications that are going to be coming out for RedCap on that. And, it probably, you can get a 5G speed type of device, like getting a Maserati or a Porsche, but in the end, you got to drive on a road that's limited to 70 miles an hour. But you want to get there in, a few seconds or a few minutes or whatever, and you need to get to 70 miles an hour as quickly as possible. So that's the latency aspect of this thing. You need to be able to drive, and you need a car that's dependable and things like that. So you don't need the Maserati. Yeah, everybody wants one, but not everybody can afford it, right? So you don't really need it, right? And I think RedCap is going to be a great infrastructure to probably deliver on a lot of the things that 4G was delivered on, but it's going to be faster and better. The other thing it does is that it eliminates the 4G type of a network dependency. So now the carriers can move to full 5G, which means that full spectrum will be used by autonomous vehicles and it'll be used by autonomous devices, lawnmowers, right? That's a 5G, a lot of data, a lot of AI, a lot of analytics that are going into this thing in real time, right? And RedCap is what fills the gap for things like the phones and tablets and routers and the 4G devices we have today.
Can you provide some context around what these shifts in different network technologies mean for OEMs and people building products today, and why it's so important that they minimally work with a partner that understands that, or try, if they can, to keep up with this themselves?
So we have very regular calls with our carrier partners, every couple of weeks, once a month, cadence calls. What's going on? What's the technology? What are we doing? Can you share with me what you're doing in this area? And so we're always, in tune with what's happening globally with the carrier partners we work with, and people who are designing, sprinkler systems, connected cameras, autonomous devices and stuff like that don't have that insight. They're not always engaged with the carriers, so they're missing part of like where's the future going. So it's important for solution providers that are going to introduce a product to really work with somebody who understands the market, understands the shifts, the paradigm shifts that are happening in cellular, that understands where the technology is going, where the carriers are investing those dollars,
Right.
to be able to make sure they design something that's going to give them the global reach that they're looking for, and not limit their ability to sell a product in a market where can't support it, as
Right.
an example.
Can you speak to any situations that we've seen where a solution provider or an OEM picked the wrong horse in your verbiage?
So the problem is when you're designing something and you're trying to predict the technology, if you make the decision, well, this is what's available today, and you design for today, 3 years from now, there may be no such thing. Probably a good example. We were just talking about RedCap, where RedCap was now 2/3 of the way deployed in the US. It's nowhere near that anywhere around the world, right? To the best of my knowledge, right? But it's coming. Well, if you're designing products for yesterday's technology, Cat-M1, NB-IoT, because that's what you knew, and you're not aware of what's happening with the migration to 5G, then you're going to run the risk that you're going to introduce a product that's not going to be available in all markets, or maybe yesterday's technology, and that's part of the problem. So we've seen companies that have spent a few years designing products around what they know well, which is the U.S. market for things, and then went and launched it, and it wasn't available in other markets around the world. And so by the time they launched it, now they're scrambling to like, well, I can't ship it in this market because there's no support for it, and things like that. Or designing something, for markets around Europe, where in some cases there's NB-IoT, in other markets there's a Cat-M1, and in some markets there's neither. And so you end up with, what's the right solution, right? Or worst case, you ship a product to another country where only one of the three carriers has that technology, but they have a captive. You have to have a direct relationship with them, so you can't use that network unless you had a direct relationship with it. So you can't roam on those networks either. And so there's a lot of nuances when it relates to picking the right horse, right? And I think it's important to, understand what your goals are, right? And what are the technologies and what do you want to do? So for example, let's say I'm going to design a camera system, a street camera, right? Or something to that effect, right? Surveillance camera. But that's something that's going to come out a year from now, year and a half from now. I would be looking at RedCap for that type of technology, because by the time that comes, the camera comes out, that is full swing. But keep in mind, that may be the case only in the US. So you have to have support for, a module that does RedCap, but also does 4G failover. So that way, or not failover, but 4G support as well. So in the markets where you don't have RedCap, you can still use that product and sell that product.
How does Zipit compare to other companies to help the device builders of the world adapt and stay aware of changing shifts in the market, the connectivity market?
So we don't just sell data, right? We help companies bring products to market by providing them the right solution for what they're trying to deliver, and understanding the hardware elements of this thing, understanding who are the key players, understanding what are the challenges with buying data and selling data and monetizing it, and subscription systems and or subscription methods is key to helping somebody be successful in their market, right? And I think what makes us unique is the fact that we're not just selling data. We are helping solution providers optimize their products and bring them to market and roll them out and globally, or enable them for global expansion, because we have these global relationships with the carriers and with partners that do that.
If you want people to take 2 or 3 key things from this conversation about changing network technologies and shifts in connectivity around the world, what advice would you give?
You need a partner. You need somebody who's going to be there with you and help you understand the things that they can bring to the table that, as a solution provider, you don't have access to it. Let me give you an example, right? There's certification issues you have to go through. Well, who is the company that's going to make sure that they get pointed in the right direction for assistance to certification? We don't do certification, but we know who those people are, right? We're not the carrier, but we know what the carriers want, right? So having somebody that can guide them on the technology, having somebody that can guide them on the certifications and point them in the right directions or what things to do. So somebody that is not just focused on the market that they're currently in, somebody that understands that global view, somebody that understands the technology, I think is a key part of doing that right. The second thing that I would say along with that is be realistic as to what your goals are going to be. I like the crawl, walk, run analogy where it's like, listen, maybe the first thing you do is launch a product to prove the market in the market that you're in. And then you figure out how you start expanding it. So the big mistakes people would make would be trying to boil the ocean in one shot, right? Maybe that's not the right thing to do. And I think the third thing is make that decision early. Pick the partner who's going to help you early versus 6 months or a year or two, and then all of a sudden you come to the conclusion you designed the wrong thing, you spent all this money, and you missed the market opportunity, and you're gone, right? Because somebody else has come in with something that thought about.
Right, you missed your shot.
Missed your shot.
Well, thank you, Ralph. Thanks for the insights, and it's helpful as always.
Sure.